Welcome everybody. Thank you for your attendance. My name is Roberto Maffei. I am Italian. I am the president in office of ARPA-Firenze APS, a non-profit association established in Florence, Italy, since the year 2004. I am also in charge of the internal research group ALBERT. ALBERT is an acronym which means ARPA-Firenze APS Landmarks on Human Behavior Experimental Research Team. The speech I am going to present is a synthesis of studies carried out inside the association and the research group along the last 15 years about. It also represents an advancement in relation to my speech in the Retrieving Emotions conference held in Florence in last April. It is 2021, July. My speech is titled, If Gut Instincts Orient Heads, Rethinking the Relationships Among Instincts and Reason. Its aim is to shed some more light on the existence and the interplay of these two aspects of human behavior. Through this, it aspires to contribute to a deeper understanding of the whole subject, along with the possibility to outline some new concepts, and in the end, to place instincts and emotions in the place they deserve with regards to human behavior. I will approach the subject through the point of view of scientific investigation of human behavior, and I will start focusing on the question of dualism. Concepts of dualism can be traced back to ancient Greece and the roots of Western philosophy. Today, the idea that in human behavior two very different aspects coexist, complementing and confronting each other, is tacitly shared among a majority of experts as well as among ordinary people. On the one hand, rationality and logical thinking, on the other hand, emotions and instincts. Along the route from ancient Greece to present world, many important scholars contributed to such fusion with their studies. From the point of view of human behavior scientific investigation, when we say instincts or emotions, we refer to automatisms. Emotional reactions cannot be avoided or prevented. They do not depend on our will. Furthermore, in our perception, they are automatically contrasted with what seems to be the other side of human behavior: reason, logic, and conscious thinking. About dualism in modern and contemporary age, one main scholar is René Descartes, Cartesius. He named res cogitans and res extensa the two aspects. Today we can refer to Daniel Kahneman and his fast thinking, say intuition, versus slow thinking, say conscious reasoning. But even Paul Ekman, with his famous studies on emotion expressions, contrasts the presumed universal body language with spoken natural language and describes them to different domains. Also in Thomas Fuchs's recent works on psychopathologies, we can find the distinction between instincts and intentionally built behaviors, presented through a cogent comparison of human beings and the other animals' behaviors. The question is, why? Why do we regularly stumble upon dualism when we study human behavior and knowledge and thinking? For time reasons, I cannot delve into details here. However, scientific literature contains evidence enough to state that this happens on the basis of an a priori assumption very widely shared in such field of study: the idea that the brain, precisely the central nervous system, is the command and control center of the whole organism. Such concept seems to be logical and also consistent with our everyday experience. However, if we consider human organism as a system, it would be like isolating one of its parts, even though a main one like the brain, and arbitrarily give it a preeminent function. But this way, we would have changed the system itself. In fact, we would be going to study a new system. Someone is beginning to raise doubts about this concept. For example, Professor Thomas Fuchs, in at least 3 occasions, his 2018 book Ecology of the Brain and Species in 2019 and 2020, stated that the central nervous system should not be assumed as a command and control center, rather as a connection hub or something similar. Such a point of view should be taken in extremely serious consideration and deepened. I will try to propose some reflections in this direction. In the life sciences field, every new idea must pass a test before being accepted. Compliance with evolution theory. Is the idea about non-centrality of central nervous system consistent with evolution theory? We have reasons to think it is. The origins of nervous systems in animal evolution stand as a crucial point. About this, we can refer to Canadian biologist Sally Lisi's work. She is a primitive animals specialist, porifera and coelenterata, say sponges and jellyfishes. Actually, porifera have no nervous system, and coelenterata have nervous systems with no central organ comparable with the brain. In her opinion, I quote by memory, our concept of a nervous system based on a brain which controls and governs all neural activities is overestimated and needs a complete revision. It seems that in animal evolution, the presence of a nervous system starts as a pure network rather than as a center which branches into the whole organism in order to control its activities. Its function seems to be to connect and to allow coordination rather than to command. And what we know about evolution says that each new step builds upon the previous ones, rather than introduce totally new solutions. Even if we concentrate on the special evolution chapter of homination, we can find consistency. Some special features of Homo sapiens behavior are linked to its brain frontal lobes. A comparison among hominids and present times human skulls clearly shows the expansion of the anterior part, two anatomical effects of which are its volume increasing and the forehead elevating. Our extraordinarily advanced logical capacities, our reasoning, and our culture are somehow linked to our frontal lobes. And once more, I must underline that the less arrived must be built upon previous features and be coherent with them. What means that reasoning and culture are built upon instincts and emotions, rather than having come in order to take control on these like a new and external command center. In turn, this means that human beings are structured in order to react before reasoning, what is consistent with evolution theory while implies a contradiction. Consistency with evolution theory is due to the fact that our species evolved while dwelling in a natural hostile environment, in which the only game allowed was surviving. In such context, thinking before acting requires too much time. It is the Kahneman's slow thinking and cannot assure survival, while instinctive reactions, innate or apprehended automatism, the Kahneman's fast thinking, can. Contradiction is due to the fact that 10,000, 12,000 years ago, the game changed. Human beings' surviving strategies, thanks to their cultural development, changed, and they, instead of merely acting inside their natural environment, began to transform it and bend it to their own necessities. The agricultural revolution started building an artificial environment which had better required the reasoning before acting. However, the natural evolution rate is too slow with respect to cultural evolution rate, and we are still stuck there. We have a biological structure consistent with the oldest Stone Ages, but we live today in a totally artificial context with which such structure is at odds, is a source of problems, and does damage. So, the hypothesis that the brain is not the center of control and command of the organism, and that rationality is not the leading process in human behavior, appear to be scientifically founded. But this is not all. Connectomics and human embryology give us more clues. It is shared among scholars. Edoardo Boncinelli highlighted it in the 2016 Futura Festival. Fuchs recently repeated this data, that human brain contains about 100 billion neurons, each one of which establishes an average of about 10,000 connections. The total amounts to about 1,000 trillion, 1 million billion connections, say 10 raised to the 15th power. Such an incredible number suggests the idea that, in a human organism, everything could be connected with everything, or something very close to such image. And it must also be considered that the network is not static. Frontal lobe's development goes on up until about the age of 25 years. Then, central nervous system is engaged in establishing new connections and pruning old ones in a continuous upgrading process which is strictly individual and subjective. Human central nervous system embryology is completely known from a morphological slant, not enough with regards to connections. In the third week of development, human embryo nervous system has begun to grow up as neural plate. Short time later, this leads to a small tube, the neural tube, the cephalic vesicles of which will become the brain. Neural tube is 4 mm long in the fourth week of development. What is substantially unknown is what happens among the neurons during the central nervous system development. It is plausible that neurons connect one another from the beginning, and in a way that is partially determined by genetics, but also influenced and conditioned by individual features of each single human subject. Conclusion: the network is huge, and it presumably connects everything with everything. The concept of center fades. In addition, it is unique for each single human being. Human organism is a system which works as a unit, sharing a common recognizable scheme with whole humanity, but also bearing crucial individual differences. For all this also, it is legitimate to assume non-centrality of central nervous system as a serious scientific hypothesis. We can now address the difficulties connected to such hypothesis and the possible consequences of its confirmation. The first and main difficulty is at imagination level. It is hard for us to imagine a system as complicated as a human organism which can run and work without a command and control center, without plans and preset schemes. However, such image is impossible just inside a deterministic paradigm. Inside a complexity paradigm, it is fully possible. For brevity's sake, I cannot delve into details in this speech. In short, I can say that a mechanistic approach and a rigid application of cause and effect law make inconceivable the idea of a system composed by different parts which are independent but can simultaneously work synergistically together without a command center. The maximum advancements possible in such perspective are the emergence hypothesis, the emergence theories, or the circularity ones, proposed, for example, by Professor Fuchs. Such hypotheses have the remarkable merit of reconnecting body and mind rigidly separated in the cognitivist view of human organism and its behavior, especially thinking and knowledge. However, from this hypothesis accounts, it is impossible to draw a simple alternative to the simplified image of the brain as a computing machine. In order to go beyond this, a new scientific paradigm is required. Actually, this new paradigm is not so new, because it can be traced back to the crisis of physics at the border of 19th and 20th century. The uncertainty principle, Heisenberg 1926, and quantum mechanics opened the way to it. And scientific research has collected a lot of confirmation, but has not yet clearly enough outlined the complexity paradigm. I will restrict my description to 3 fundamental mechanistic principles which must be rethought. From a philosophical slant, we should renounce to the non-contradiction principle. Natural systems can simultaneously be A and not A, what has been already proved at any level at which nature can be investigated, from quantum mechanics to cosmological scale phenomena. From a physics point of view, we should rethink the cause and effect law. Every natural phenomena will continue to have physical causes. However, such concept must be combined with a simultaneity effect. The idea of a univocal relationship between a single cause and a single effect should be abandoned. Rather, we should think in terms of simultaneous multiple causes which, interacting, can produce one or multiple effects. From a methodological slant, we should start thinking natural and also social worlds in terms of interactions among systems rather than between isolated physical bodies or entities. Just an example. Human organism is a system composed by lower-level systems, the organs. In turn, each organ is a system composed by lower-level systems, the cells, and so on, up to the molecular level and to the atomic and subatomic levels. And at each level, we will find the same complexity, i.e., violation of the non-contradiction principle and simultaneity of multiple causes. Natural world has a fractal nature, and social world can be represented in a totally analogous way. Better, the border between natural and social worlds fades. But in this case also, I have to drop the topic. What about the possible consequences of the non-centrality hypothesis once it is confirmed and accepted? 2 main methodological ones are the following. The first is that mechanistic scientific method, based on the isolation of variables and their study one at a time, in the perspective of recomposing the studied system later, is inapplicable. Variables studied as isolated or studied inside the system they belong to in real conditions behave differently, what means that complex systems can be conceived as integrated systems, i.e. composed by separated components, but they can also be seen as units, which should be studied in their whole integrity at their own level. Assuming one stance or the other can lead to totally different results. Vittorio Gallese, in his speech at the psychiatrist conference in Genoa, it was 2020 January, represented neuroscience laboratory studies in comparison with real experiences through his metaphor of looking through a keyhole. My interpretation of what he means is that neuroscience must adapt to a limited vision because a direct and complete one is inaccessible. My point of view is that this happens because of the application of a mechanistic paradigm only. The second consequence is that a complex system can be studied using digital devices, but, in force of its complexity, is not suitable for digitalization. It works analogically, and this poses an insuperable limit, for example, to the reproduction of human thinking on a computer. Analogical and digital processes are incommensurable, given that the first are continuous and the latter are discontinuous. transhumanism, posthumanism dreams will never become true. Is this new scenario I outlined able to hold a simple alternative to the simplified cognitivist image of the human brain as a computing machine? In my opinion, it is. What is needed is just to follow the thread of nervous system natural history and reverse the steps. I mean that there is no dualism, rather one process with a unique time sequence. Information processing does not precede human reactions to stimuli. Rather, any stimulus triggers immediately and automatically a whole organism reaction that is simultaneously based on genetics, biological structures, organism individual features, and personal history, biological as well as cultural, of the involved subject. Conscious thinking follows. In the sense I titled this speech, If Gut Instincts Orient Heads. That's exactly what happens. Any automatic reaction involves the whole organism. It is immediate, literally, without any mediation by some organism components or data processing, and it is automatic in the sense that it precedes every voluntary actions. This happens the same way for everybody. Einstein and the denier, any kind of denier, share the same process. Results can be very different. William James's example of encountering a bear, we are about at the end of the 19th century, can give us a precise idea of this. In synthesis, if while strolling in a wood I encounter a bear and then flee, common interpretation would be, I see the bear, that's the stimulus perception, I know it is a dangerous animal, that's the conscious processing of information, I get frightened and run away, and that's the reaction. However, James's stance was different. When I realize there is a bear, then my body, my organism, starts a desperate run. That's the automatic reaction. While I'm fleeing, I become conscious of my organism state. I realize my breath is short, my heartbeat is accelerated, my skin has got goose flesh, and I name all this fright. In our opinion, William James was perfectly right. Automatic reaction precedes, then other processes start from the consciousness of that automatic reaction. Along with ARPA-Firenze APS internal research group Albert, we found a confirmation of this idea. I am referring to one publication of ours titled Contributions to a Neurophysiology of Meaning. The interpretation of written messages could be an automatic stimulus reaction mechanism before becoming conscious processing of information. It was issued, peer-reviewed, in 2015. We documented the process of natural language interpretation, approaching this study through concepts consistent with the scenario of complexity paradigm. Our research proved that, at least in the case of natural language interpretation, automatic reaction precedes, does not follow, conscious thinking. We also underlined that consciousness, at first, is not directly related to the triggering event, e.g. encountering the bear. Rather, it is to the automatic reaction. At first, a conscious contact with external events is precluded to us. Such consciousness is, at first, related just to our automatic reaction. Only in a following passage, and just under certain conditions, it will be possible to approach back the real event, rationally analyze it is the Kahneman's slow thinking, and make intentional choices. In our 2015 publication, we use the example of the consultant's professional behavior. I will not detail this now for time reasons. If gut instincts structurally precede rationality, then the real critical point is what happens after. how the automatic reaction is handled, rather than the reaction itself. Such handling can be good or bad, do good or harm. However, given the human being's capacity to learn even automatisms, Kahneman again clearly showed this, automatic reactions management can be educated. It can be driven toward a widespread social diffusion of functional behaviors instead of dysfunctional ones. Let's take into account that this is not simple, and that the educational systems of industrialized nations stay on a deep crisis and are progressively losing their efficacy. One reason for this, in my opinion, are present times approaches, which still remain based on old premises and operate in traditional ways. In this case, traditional ways means deterministic approach, the scientific method based on isolating variables and studying them one at a time in a laboratory. What's the opposite of a systemic, complex approach? But this content also will need a dedicated speech. Thank you for your attention.